I'm not young. I'm not exactly old either. Probably older than most of you reading this though. I grew up in a time before cell phones. The internet was a pretty new thing, and we most certainly didn't have places like this to share weird or scary stories. I wish there had been something like that though. Maybe I would have gotten some advice, or at least had a better record, than a spotty memory hazed over with the alcohol and drug use of my 20s. Honestly, I had mostly forgotten about the truth of this incident. That is, until recently it all came flooding back like a nightmarish wave. I think my brain protected me from the trauma, buried it so deep it took a long time to come to the surface. It's at the surface now though. Now that it's back. I'm jumping ahead though. Let's start at the beginning. The year was 1996. I was 14 years old and living in a small California town. My parents had purchased a house on the mountains. My father had become disenfranchised with life in the city, and wanted to go somewhere that our closest neighbor was nearly a mile away. I can't say it made me, or my sister Katie, too terribly happy. We lost all of our friends, and ended up in this small town school that involved in our long bus ride to and from the campus. She made new friends quickly. She was 2 years older than me, pretty, popular, and the kind of person people were drawn to. I, on the other hand, was short, awkward, and quiet. Suffice to say, I got picked on a lot and didn't adjust super well. My father saw it as an opportunity to toughen me up and teach me some things about how to take care of our new home. If you're just going to be sitting around the house all summer anyway, then you might as well learn some life skills. And that was that. I took one last look at my new PlayStation, and my copy of Resident Evil I'd saved my allowance for and was put to work. I cleaned gutters, mowed the lawn, helped my dad paint the garage, and finally the most important task to this story, I helped him build a new woodshed. I say helped, but in reality he talked me through it, and I did the majority of the labor. I think he always wished I was more the type to work with my hands, even though, especially at that age, I was more into drawing, writing, and video games than sitting in the sun and building a shed. "We gotta get you some caluses, kiddo," he would say while slapping my back. Builds character. I'm honestly not sure if I built any character, but I damn sure built that woodshed. Old grocery store pallets made up the flooring, but the walls and roof were these huge corrugated aluminum sheets to make sure the rain ran off and away from the wood piles. I cut myself so many damn times getting those sheets in place. I looked like I'd lost a fight with a razor blade factory. Sometimes I wonder if all the blood I spilled in that grass summoned him, like I accidentally performed some ritual that I was totally unaware of. 1. Spill a couple pints of blood on your backyard lawn. 2. Curse profusely while putting up a woodshed with your dad laughing at you the whole time. 3. Spend every night praying to whatever deity will listen that you don't have to spend another second working on that damn shed. 4. Summon an unholy evil that permanently scars you and leaves a broken mess repressing memories for the majority of your life. Pretty chic ritual if you ask me. I'm joking though. It has nothing to do with the blood, or even the shed, really. The shed is just where he first appeared. I can remember that night with more clarity than I wish to. It was the night I finished building. I remember my dad actually telling me I did a good job as he inspected my work. He brought me a Coke with dinner, said it would be a beer if I was a little older, and honestly I appreciated the gesture. I know I make him seem like a hard ass, but the reality was that he was a good man, just very old school in his sensibilities. After dinner I went up to my room, and finally spent some time playing my game. My sister had left for the night. She was going on her first date, with a boy she'd met at school. Since she was going to be out late, my parents agreed I'd earned it, and said I could stay up as late as I wanted. My hands hurt and I was exhausted, but I honestly didn't care. I felt like I'd earned my time to relax and enjoy myself. It felt good. I stayed up way too late. The clock rolled over to 1:30 and I finally told myself I should get some sleep because who knew what chore Dad had for me the next day. After getting ready for bed I went to my window and looked out at my handiwork. Actually pretty proud of myself. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was my dad, but as my eyes adjusted looking in the dark I realized he was far too tall, far too lanky and far too pale. His clothes hung off his thin frame in ragged tatters and bellowed in the night breeze. He walked around the shed, sliding his hand against the aluminium walls. Asterisk tink asterisk tink asterisk tink. The sound of his nails clicking against the bends in the metal. Then he looked up at me. There was a shine in his eyes, like the shine a raccoon has when you catch it hunting through your trash. His face was gaunt and pale. Sunken cheeks made his cheekbones look like sharp daggers, jutting out of the sides of his face. His mouth was little more than a thin line of nothing, drawn onto his low-set jaw. It wriggled slightly as he fixed his gaze on me. Awake to late. It spoke. I shouldn't have been able to hear its soft whisper, yet I could very easily. It rang in my ears with a pitch similar to someone rubbing a wetted finger on a half-full crystal glass. Its stutter, A manufactured weakness like its weak-looking frame. Come out to play. Or I come in, cocked its head at an unnatural angle and twisted it further and further until it was looking at me almost upside down. It hummed and the drone filled the air around me. The floor beneath my feet vibrated at the odd frequency, and it resonated through my legs and into my chest. I tried to cry out to my parents, but I felt paralyzed. I still don't know if it did something to me, or if I was just so scared I couldn't move. I watched as it twisted its body into a bizarre angle and skittered from the woods to the side of the house. I could hear it clambering up the wall toward my window. My feet finally broke free from their place on the ground, and I stumbled backward toward the door to my room. Dad. Mom. I remember saying the words, but I honestly can't be sure if it was a shout or a whisper, though I would realize it didn't really matter. The face suddenly appeared in my second-story window. It was close enough now that I could better make out its features. The eyes still gleamed from the sunken place in its sockets, and the lined mouth still quivered as it hummed its awful noise. Paper-thin skin was stretched tightly across its skull. You could almost make out the blood pumping in the veins of its face. The humming stopped as its mouth stretched open into an awful void-like maw, and it clapped its jaws together quickly and sharply, over and over again. The snapping noise of its mouth opening and closing at high speed sounded like a camera shutter quickly taking pictures. I barely had time to think if I had locked my window before the creature slid its bony fingers into the crack of the windowsill and lifted it. It slithered through like liquid, and before it touched the ground I had flung my bedroom door open and ran into the hallway towards my parents. They were still sound asleep in their bed. I ran over to my father and started shaking him, trying to wake him up, but it was like he was in a coma. I shook and shook, but his eyes stayed closed and his body stayed still. I ran around the bed to try the same thing with my mother, screaming like a madman the whole time for them to wake up. Sleep like little angels, sleep like the dead. It stood in my parents' doorway. It looked taller than before, and as if it was wreathed in shadow. Its head twisted naturally again, and it wrapped its fingers around the doorframe as if it was about to pounce. That's when I heard the front door open. It was quiet, my sister trying to sneak in after her curfew. Not quiet enough though. The thing spun its head around quickly, reacting to the new presence in the house, and before I could react it was making its way to the stairs with unnatural grace and fluidity. Its hands and feet clawed the walls, knocking pictures down. I could hear them breaking on the ground. I ran after it, not even sure what the hell I was planning to do. I watched it vanish down the stairs, and heard my sister let out one of the most terrifying screams I've ever heard. Even when I had convinced myself there was never a monster, that it had simply been a human intruder in our home that night, I never forgot the sound of that scream. From the top of the stairs I watched as the thing encircled my sister like a constrictor, its thin fingers grabbing her throat and squeezing to cut short that awful scream into a painful wheeze. It opened its mouth again and made that camera shutter clack a few more times before it did something I still can't even begin to fathom or properly do justice with my words. It drained the life from her. I could see it happening, her eyes wide with terror as her form seemed to blur in what I could most accurately describe as her soul was ripped from her body and into that horrid creature's open mouth. Her hair turned white and her skin went pallid and gray until she almost looked like the thing that was killing her. I bolted down the stairs in an attempt to stop what I was seeing, but was quickly flung away as it reached an arm out and threw me backwards with little to no effort. I slammed hard against the stairway and heard my legs snap. I watched, screaming in a mix of terror and pain, as it drained every last drop of life from my sister and left her a sunken wide-eyed shell on the floor of our entryway. I knew I was next. It stared at me with those gleaming eyes rolling in their sockets and stretched that thin line into a facsimile of a smile. And then it turned away and slithered through the half-open front door. I was left alone, legs shattered and mind broken, staring helplessly at my sister's lifeless body. It felt like I was laying there for hours, soaking in the scene around me, the pain in my leg fading to shock and thoughts racing through my mind as to why it didn't kill me too. The screams of my parents when they finally woke up and found us seemed like they were happening in another world, like distant cries of pain being carried on the wind. My parents never really recovered from the loss. The police created a narrative that made sense to them. A prowler breaks into an isolated home. The kids, myself and my sister, startle this prowler and he attacks us. My leg is broken and my poor sister is apparently scared to death. Heart failure due to an acute stress response. What kind of 16-year-old girl has heart failure from being scared? My parents bought it though, unfortunately. They never forgave themselves for sleeping through the encounter, despite the fact that the creature had obviously put them in a comatose state while he attacked us.